All right, welcome to our fireside chat, everyone. It's hosted by V1. My name is Simei, and for those of you who are new, we are V1, and we're the entrepreneurship community for student builders at the University of Michigan to connect and collaborate. We're super excited to have Alex Lieberman, founder and CEO of Morningbrew, in the house tonight. So, Alex, I just want to start off by thanking you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me. I'm pumped to do this.
Awesome. I think the last time we met was, I think in February, right? When you came to talk in to Tamid at Ross.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, and any chance I have to do anything Michigan related, I generally do it just because we'll get into it, but in some ways, like none of my entrepreneurial pursuits would have happened without Michigan. Probably in like less conventional ways than you would think. I would say it was actually less about the classes and more about everything else that helped inform what we're doing and make it possible. So yeah, any opportunity I have to chat with people from Michigan, work with the university, it's something I love doing.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much again. So let's get started, everyone. We want this to be more of a discussion and less like an interview. We want it to be really interactive and have everyone, have the opportunity to ask Alex questions. And I think that's the way we can make this like the best experience possible for all of us. So therefore, this is what we're doing. If you're not in our Discord yet, I'm gonna resend the link in the chat. So if you're new to V1, you can join our Discord. And once you join our Discord, click on the Fireside channel on the left. So I just sent a message in the Fireside channel. Can you please react to it if you can see it? The best part about Discord is that we can react to messages, and it just makes everything so much more fun. Cool. So now that everyone is in, let's just establish like what we're going to be doing. So in the text chat, you can have random comments, questions, links, anything else. And yeah, we're going to be chatting for a bit, and then we'll open up the floor. So yeah, Alex, wanted to start off like talking a little about you and building an audience. So you've built an audience with Morningbrew, which for anyone who doesn't know is the top business newsletter. Read it every morning. And starting out the company at Michigan, growing it, and then eventually getting it acquired by Business Insider for 75 million, which is awesome. Congrats again. And it's always great to see, Michigan companies. So you've been building audiences for Morningbrew across all of its different products, and then you've been building your own personal audience as well, which is really fascinating to see. So just wanted to get started, with your story, hear more about how Morningbrew was started, and then would love to dive deeper into like your growth tactics, how you started the ambassador and referral programs, and anything else that would be helpful to understand how you and Austin, got this off the ground.
Yeah, for sure. So I get what I'll do is I'll talk for a second about how we founded the company. I won't spend a lot of time on it because honestly, like I've told that story so many times that I don't want to be like redundant for you guys.
Yeah.
And I'd rather talk about stuff that you all want to talk about. But just so you have context, goal of Morningbrew has not changed since day one. It is to empower the modern business leader with engaging and accessible content. The way the business has evolved is just our manifestation of that mission has changed. So when we first launched, we were literally just daily newsletter sent out to Michigan students in Ross, keep them up to speed with what's happening in the business world. Fast forward, the business now has 2.6 million subscribers on the original newsletter. Million people open it up every day. The total ecosystem is the size of Chicago across 6 products. So we have our daily newsletter. We have Sidekick, which is our lifestyle newsletter because people do things outside of work, believe it or not. And then we have Business Casual, which is our bi-weekly podcast where Kinsey Grant interviews the biggest names in business. So Reed Hastings, Mark Cuban, Barbara Corcoran, Meg Whitman, big people like that. That gets 150,000 downloads a week. That's our B2C business. And then our B2B business includes 3 newsletters: Retail Brew, Emerging Tech Brew, and Marketing Brew. The way you guys can think about the distinction is between B2C and B2B is basically the job that these different products do for those audiences and who pays to basically fund those businesses. we're an advertising based business. In the B2C business, anyone who advertises in B2C is generally trying to get you as an individual to open your wallet and spend your money. In the B2B business, an advertiser is trying to get you to open your wallet, take out your company's credit card and spend their money. That is the distinction. And I would say our B2B content generally serves the purpose of making you better at your specific job and helping you make smarter decisions in your job. Whereas B2C, I would say, makes you a better informed business professional so that you aren't caught sounding stupid in a casual conversation. Like if to this day, if people ask me like, why has Morning Brew succeeded and why have you been able to build habit? I think it goes down to like human beings, like core behavior of loss aversion or of acting based off of fear. And I think that when you give someone a product that helps give them information so that they are armed with the right things to say in a conversation with their boss, their friend, their coworker, and helps them sound like the smartest person in the room, I think that's a really powerful unlock. And so that's the business. We have 70 people on staff. Business did $21 million in revenue last year. The goal is 35 million this year. We're all remote right now. And I generally focus on the content of the company. So like any new content we're creating, I'm really involved in that. Any new product we're creating, so we're working on a paid subscription product, I'm involved in that. And then kind of like all things related to like hiring, culture in the business. That's like where I spend my time. And we'll get to it, but also just like experiencing the evolution of all the different roles, like doing all the different things from like super in the weeds, like in the trenches, executing, writing, selling the brew, growing the brew, to then managing managers, to then like thinking high level about the business. It's been interesting to see that evolve and also understanding myself what I like better at like which stages and which roles of the business I like better. So that's the brew. And the reason I would just say to all of you, even if you want to start a business or you've started a business and it's not a media business, my fundamental belief is that every business in the world in the internet economy needs to know how to build audience, because if you are selling any product or service, how are you going to do that? Are you going to like scream in an empty stadium, or are you going to scream in a full stadium? The hope is you scream in a full stadium, because if you scream in an empty stadium, the only way to get customers is that you pay to get the stadium full, as in like Facebook ads or Instagram ads. You actually pay for customers. Obviously, no matter what business you're in, the less you can pay for customers, the better. So I think no matter what business you go into in 2021, you need to understand how to build audience. And so I could talk for way too long about like how I think about audience building, but I'll stop there.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. And then so you're talking about audience building, and it's one thing to have an audience, another thing to keep them engaged so that you have their attention. I read somewhere that you had like 50% open rates, and that's like really cool. How are you able to keep like such a high open rate, like 2, 3, 4x the normal industry average, and how do you see yourself, continue to keep that up?
Yeah, so I think it comes down to, there's just like when you build habit with a consumer, it's a really powerful thing. When you start taking up someone's like mental real estate for 5 minutes in their morning, and it just becomes subconscious that when they're walking to class, or whether they just went to their computer and it's the first thing they do and they no longer actively think about it, it's like the same as like deciding to get out of bed and walk to the bathroom. Like that is the way that people treat reading the brew. It's just like a special relationship you build with a consumer, because it, again, habit is super valuable, but also monetizing habit is valuable, because when people keep coming back, it just means that each customer is more valuable. Obviously, someone who opens our newsletter for 50 straight days is more valuable than someone who opens it for 5 straight days and then unsubscribes. So I think it's the combination of, by doing something daily, it made it really hard because we don't have any days off. Like our writers are writing every single day of the week. It's an absolute grind. But if you are able to pull it off, if you own a piece of someone's day every single day of the week, it can be an incredible way to retain people. Because I just even think about it in my own life, like my daily habits are way stronger in my life than my weekly habits or my bi-weekly habits. I think it is very difficult, no matter what product you have, to keep incredibly strong non-daily habits. And so I think that's what we've done. And the other part of it is like we just had to create a good product. So aside from it being daily, it was the fact that the key insight when we were starting the brew, it was my senior year. I was in Ross. My co-founder, Austin, was a sophomore. And I'd already accepted a job to work at Morgan Stanley. So like wasn't re-recruiting, didn't have to take a ton of classes. And so I was helping other students prep for job interviews. And I would always ask them, how do you keep up with the business world? And every student would say, I read the Wall Street Journal, blah, 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 blah. They would go on and on. And at some point I was like, this is crazy. These kids are working their asses off to have careers in business, yet they don't have content that makes them excited about the business world. Like when you actually step back and think about that for a second, that once you graduate from college, you're 21 or 22, you're going to spend the next 40 years of your life working in a job, probably on average. 50% of your waking hours are going to be actually working. And the fact that one, that people obviously go into jobs that they don't ultimately feel fulfilled by or like, or they don't see a path to fulfillment, or the fact that there isn't content that supports that fulfillment, that was crazy to me. And so the idea was like, let's just create content, like good shit that people actually like, that feels like they're having a conversation with their friend, but they're learning about the business world. That is, smart, witty, pithy, not pretentious, and respects the reader's time. And that's basically what we did. And it started with like me writing this thing called Market Corner. That was like the original brew that I sent to a listserv, Market Corner at umich.edu. And it basically ended up, after like 3 months of doing it, we had a list of like 400 people, which is very small. But that, from writing Market Corner, that's like how I knew there was appetite, because it was impossible to sign up for it. There's no website. The look of it was horrible. It wasn't like an email newsletter, like in a template. It was a PDF that I would fill out every day, attach to an email, send to this listserv, and people would have to request access for me to add them to the listserv. So there was so much friction, yet people were still signing up for it. So Market Corner was like the early proof of concept of this. Brought Austin on as my co-founder, and we launched Morningbrew in like true newsletter form in March of 2015. And by the way, at this point in time, we had no idea this was going to be a business. This was just like our fun, like side hustle that we were doing because it was fulfilling and people liked it.
That's sick. Like, it's so cool to see, like, the origin stories are always small. And I think like a lot of like aspiring entrepreneurs, everyone, like in school, we learn how to, like a lot of us are in tech or in business, like we learn the theory, but we don't really learn how to build something. And I think like the biggest thing you can do is just start, right? Start in the smallest possible way. And that's exactly what you guys did, which is sick.
Totally. And what I'll say is like, there are a lot of serial entrepreneurs who build things that they are not the target customer for. And I think that is so much harder than what we've done, because Austin and I, like, we are our reader. When we were writing our product, when we were growing our product, we were the Morningbrew reader. We were the target we were writing for. Even as I think about in the future, starting other businesses, I find it very difficult to think about, how do I build a business where I am not the customer? And I know it's possible. People have done that before. I just don't know if I have the toolkit yet to be able to do that effectively.
Yep. Makes a lot of sense. And then like, so going on this like trend of talking about building audiences, right? You've built a clear, the whole Morningbrew team, you, Austin, whoever runs your Twitter is doing a great job, by the way. They deserve a raise.
Thank you. It's Toby. His Twitter ego is already massive, so please don't say that to him.
I love the Amazon meme today. That was so spot on.
He's good.
Yeah. So then going off of that, you're talking about like audiences. And I think I was reading like your podcast playbook tweet earlier today about, building for top of funnel, making sure you have an audience before launching something. So how do you approach that? Why did you decide to build your personal brand? I know you did a lot of LinkedIn stuff before, and now everyone is doubling down on Twitter. So can you talk a little bit about that? And how has, Twitter positively impacted your growth, not only for yourself, but Morningbrew and the overall brand?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think creating content on Twitter is the equivalent of like networking in 2021. Like, and this is coming from someone who, like, I spent the first like 5 or 6 years of any personal brand content or like effort happening on LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn was was where I focused all my effort. And I would honestly say that like my Twitter audience is more valuable to me today than my LinkedIn audience is. Like I think I have 70,000 followers on LinkedIn. I have 29,000 on Twitter. I would take my Twitter audience any day of the week because I just think the quality of learning and connections on Twitter has been incredible. And what you guys all should do in thinking about like why build personal brand, why create content on social is, I think fundamentally you have to believe that building a network and having strong professional connections is valuable in career. If you don't believe that, then you're not going to have like the belief or the self-motivation to build brand on social. And that's not to say it's wrong. Like there are people who have built great careers without a massive network or even a network at all. But I would say that is the exception, not the rule. When I think about people who like what does social media and like brand building allow you to do? Well, in my mind, what it allows you to do is it is like the purest form of meritocracy of ideas. So it's like on social media, you have the ability to share ideas, to state your opinion with like back information to back it up. And what's beautiful about like platforms like Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, whatever it may be, is that like these are platforms that are built for people to find content that they're interested in and self-select to follow your content. And what that means is like, I focus on creating content around like the media industry and like audience building, managing as like a first time founder, and just like the entrepreneurial journey in general. It's like the people who find my content and end up following me and end up DMing me on Twitter share those interests as well. And so I think first of all, that what that means is like the content you create on social is a reflection of the people you want to ultimately connect with. And so, not to say you need to have this like long plan and strategy of what you're going to create on social media for the next year, but I think being a little bit tactical of like what is the shit that you're really passionate about, and what are who are the people you want to build connections with and get in front of, and what's the Venn diagram of things that they care about that you're also passionate about, and focusing on content, creating content around that. Like that's generally what I do. There's a really good follow on Twitter for those of you who are on Twitter. His name is David Perel. He so he and I have become close just honestly because Austin and I are like very young founders, and we tried very hard to like find other young founders, especially in like the New York City startup scene. And he's one of those. He's a year younger than me. He graduated 2016 from Elon, I believe. And he basically, like, his whole thesis was he's really passionate about learning. So he started reading a ton, and then he started writing essays. He just created a blog online and just created essays. And what he realized to himself is that like his essays were good, but no one was finding them because he didn't understand like SEO and people finding his stuff through Google search. So then he asked himself like, how do I get people to find my stuff? He was like, oh, there's this thing called Twitter where like if I put some of my stuff into the open, the algorithms are literally built where if it's really good content, people will find it, they'll engage with it if they think it's good, and it will just continue to compound on itself. And David, his whole Twitter feed is about this idea of leveraging content creation as a way to network and as a way to attract minds that you want to surround yourself with. He teaches a course called Rite of Passage that's all about like writing on the internet and how to build brand and personal brand through the act of online writing. I took the course. I thought it was incredible. It's really freaking expensive. And I've told him like, why are you charging so much for it? But it is a really good course. But yeah, what I would say is like, I think no matter what career you want to be in, the thing you do want to do is maintain optionality for yourself. So let's say you work at PwC in consulting after you graduate. That would be considered obviously like a generally pretty traditional role to do after school. And if you're in that role, you may be like, why do I have to build personal brand? Like there's a very clear progression at PwC. Like I'm going to start as like a man at, well, I don't know what the ladder is, but whatever it is. And that is true. But the odds that you end up staying at PwC for your entire career for the next 25 years, based on just like on average, what our generations do is pretty low. And so then the question becomes, when you start looking elsewhere, when you're thinking about your next thing, where are you going to go? Who are you going to ask for thoughts? Who are you going to be your connections that you talk to that will give you ideas or open the door for you? And so to me, it's like personal brand gives you optionality where one, you surround yourself with really smart people who keep you honest about, are you doing what you want to do in your career? And once you come to that conclusion, on a consistent basis, say the answer is no, you also have people in your network that potentially can open doors for you in other places and other careers that maybe you wouldn't have had the opportunity to pivot to if you didn't build brand and network through any of these platforms.
I love that. Agree 100%. Makes a lot of sense. So, when I want to ask you, are you ever going to launch a rolling fund?
um, I, I won't say never, but I'm interested in another concept right now, which is like launching a fund only focused on creators.
Okay.
So that's like my thing is like there's so many creators, people have built some level of influence on the internet. And that doesn't mean you have a million followers. You could have like 50,000 followers, but with a hyper specific and niche audience. Like you could be a Twitch streamer who is specifically playing COD every day, and you have like the most obsessive 50,000 COD followers. I'm interested in building a fund that invests in influencers of all different shapes and sizes, and invests in basically their ability to monetize their audience. And there are a few ways that I'm thinking about that. One is like, is there a way where you can just invest in a creator and get a percentage of their future cash flow, literally investing in them like they are a business? The other idea that I'm thinking about is like, can you partner with a creator? So let's take the example of like the Twitch streamer. Can I partner with that Twitch streamer? Say, look, you have an awesome audience, but you don't know how to monetize it yet. And what you just love doing is Twitch streaming. Let's partner up and I will help you build a business. We'll come up with a product that your audience really gives a shit about, that is authentic to your brand. I will build it. You will be the marketing distribution for it. And we will take a 50-50 split on this new company we're creating. Maybe it's a keyboard brand. Keyboards are really important to gamers. What if we create like a new sleek keyboard brand that you market to your audience? It does well. And then we end up growing beyond just you. So this idea of like a creator focused fund is something I'm very interested in. Haven't started it yet though.
Yeah. Have you heard of the celebrity kitchens, or like
I
the
have not.
Mr. Beast did with the Mr. Beast burger?
I no, so I know Mr.
Yeah.
Beef's burger. I don't know like the exact like the whole
Yeah.
celebrity kitchen
So
thing. I don't
it's
know the configuration behind that.
Yeah, it's so insane. It's like there's this actual company called Virtual Dining Concepts, and they literally have a network of restaurants that they partner with, like mom and pop restaurants. So the creator, or like the approaches this company, say they want to do this, will launch the Mr. Beast Burger, and overnight it launches at 300 locations across the United States, and everyone takes 1/3 of the profit. So Mr. Beast gets 1/3, Virtual Dining Concepts gets 1/3, and the restaurant. So everyone wins. It's so fascinating. Like we've seen this with clothing is most popular. There's some products, and now it's moving its way into food, which is kind of insane.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I would like I want to dig more into it because I'd be interested. How does anyone make money in that, or at least how does the restaurant make money in that? Like I don't know what the margins are on a burger, but I
Yeah,
would have to assume they're like not super high. And if you're doing a third, a third, a third, I'm just wondering who's getting the short end of the stick, who's making like a penny on the burger.
exactly. Yeah, I'll send you a newsletter that I saw on Twitter. And you can check it out. Somebody just did some rough calculations of like an average order value of like 13 or 14 bucks.
Yep.
It was really interesting. So definitely something
Cool.
to take a look at. Cool. Okay, I want to open it up to the floor now. So we can do this in a couple of ways. We have a bunch of questions in Fireside, so keep the questions coming in. We'll go through them. And then the other way we can do this is you can raise your hand on Zoom and ask your question in person. So I'm going to go ahead while you guys figure out if you want to raise your hand or not. Let's start off with the first question that came in. He already talked about getting his first 1,000 users, $0 customer acquisition playbook. talked about that. Awesome. Yeah. So Varun asks, what made you decide to sell the company? What was going through your mind in the weeks leading up to it?
Yeah. So the process was a long process. It was like 11 months in the making. It was actually longer than that. Again, this goes back to network and like the value of networking. This is the perfect example. 2018, we were in our first office in WeWork, and at that time we were doing everything possible to grow. Like we were still small, like just scrappy, like being as scrappy as possible to get new subscribers. And one part of our growth strategy was, is there a way to partner with different websites and get these websites to cross promote with us, where we promote the website in our newsletter, they promote us on their site. And one company we were thinking about doing it with was Business Insider. And I'd been basically peppering the managing editor of Business Insider constantly, being like, yeah, we have to cross promo. You want to get in front of a younger audience. We want to get in front of your 200 million unique people on your website every month. It's perfect. And we were talking for a little while. Then he just ghosted me. I kept peppering him. He kept ghosting me. One day he introduced me to this other person who was running their subscription business at Business Insider. His name was Claudius Sensed. Got connected to Claudius. We ended up getting beers on Stone Street in New York, like down in the financial district. And then Claudius and I just ended up like building a friendship. We would do like home and home ping pong games where he would come to WeWork. We would play ping pong there. I would go to Business Insider's office. We would play ping pong there. That was beginning of 2018. Fast forward, we just continued to stay in touch. As our business grew, so did Claudius's career. Claudius went from like working on the consumer subscription business to running the consumer subscription business to being Henry Blodgett, the founder of Business Insider's chief of staff, to now being COO of all of Insider. And as he grew, he had more decision-making power. And so he approached us in early 2020 saying, hey, you guys are great at newsletters. You guys are great at podcasts. We don't know dog shit about that. Can we bring you guys in because we have such complementary businesses? That was the beginning of the conversation about like any sort of deal. And at the time we were like, honestly, we're loving what we're doing. Like we're loving building what we're building. We're controlling our own destiny. You know, we're making good money. The business is growing. And we basically said, look, we don't want to waste your time. If it's not X amount of dollars in terms of valuation, we don't want to have a conversation because we just like, we don't want to waste your guys' time. They ended up basically saying like, it's worth the conversation. And then you can assume the conversation started in like February of 2020. Then everyone knows what happened in March of 2020. That basically put acquisition talks on a hold for a little while, where it's just like a holding pattern for 2 or 3 months. Once our business normalized after COVID, and I can talk about like how we dealt with that as a business. Once things normalized, the conversation started back up and the deal closed in October of 2020. Few big things. One is working on any sort of deal, fundraising for a business. So in the early days of business, whether it's fundraising or it's like selling your business, it is a full-time job. And so like Austin and I basically had 2 full-time jobs for 11 months and it was a lot. It's also a lot to think about as the deal's going on. How much do you tell or not tell your company? Because that's one of the things you learn in entrepreneurship is like there is 95% of the time, there is not a clear answer. Things are not black and white. So it's like one could make the argument, yeah, we should have told our company about the deal happening or like these conversations the whole time because that's what transparency is. The issue is with that, like you also don't want to create whiplash. You don't want to create concern. You don't want people to feel like there's instability in the business because people having confidence in their jobs is a really important thing. When deals happen in media, the first thing that people worry about is their job is going to get cut because there are going to be synergies and the news teams and content teams of BI and Morningbrew will just merge. And that means less roles are needed. The other big thing is there were points in time where we thought the deal was going to happen. Then it wasn't going to happen. Then it was going to happen. Then it wasn't going to happen. And so that was like to us, like the best lesson in very rarely is there like a perfectly right answer. There are trade-offs and you just need to understand trade-offs in every decision that you make. Back to the original question of why did we take the deal? It was the combination of, it was a price at which the outcome was such that it was a life-changing amount of money. And as a 27-year-old, to have that optionality for the remaining, hopefully many years of my life, to invest, to start other businesses, to take care of my family. I didn't want to be greedy. And also because of how the deal was set up, we didn't sell 100% of the business. So there's still a lot of opportunity on the back end if our business continues to perform to make more money based on our performance. So it's the combination of just like a life-changing amount of money, having a partner who could support our growth. So as Morning Brew grows from newsletter business to media brand, that is exactly what Business Insider did. Business Insider started as a newsletter called Silicon Alley that was started by Henry Blodgett in his apartment. Now it's, a $900 million company with 600 employees. They saw that same evolution. I thought having mentors would be a really valuable thing because Austin and I kind of winged it for the last 4 or 5 years. And the other part of it was we would not have done a deal if we thought like our business was fundamentally going to change, like how we run it, how our employees are treated, the things we're building. Not those type of things have not changed. And we only would have picked a partner or done a deal when we felt like that was going to be the case, where we could continue building and being entrepreneurial. The real things that have changed, honestly, are like there's more meetings. Like we have board meetings once a quarter now. We have a weekly meeting to talk about potential partnerships and synergies. On the other side, though, I see a lot of value in the fact that like it's making Austin and I like grow up and mature as founders, like being forced to have more structure and plan and prepare for like meetings, something we haven't had to do ever. Like Austin literally went from college to this. To have that structure, I think is really important.
Makes a lot of sense. Really cool to hear that. So what we're going to be doing is we'll alternate from raised hand to Discord question in the chat. So Matt, feel free to take it away.
Hey, Alex. If you're first starting a company, what would your advice be to that person in finding the way to complement your personal brand with the building of the company's brand and to really find that synergy rather than just personally like reposting all of the company's content?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, in terms of marketing my company, I would start by making it my Zoom background. That's usually a good way to start. So I would say that you should just be tactical about like company brand and personal brand are two different things. And like they have different voices and different personalities. And so for me as like Alex Lieberman, it's easy for me to like say and know what my voice is because it's just me. The more of the thought around like what I create on social is more around like, again, the type of people I want to attract. And so like what is that intersection of my interests, but also the type of people I want to attract? What is the Venn diagram there? So that's more of like what I think about on my personal brand side. On the business side, it's more of like what is the voice or the persona that we want our brand to take on as if like it was a person. And so I've talked about this a lot, but like for Morning Brew, we literally have like the Bible of our voice that talks about like who Morning Brew's person is, like how old they are, what they do on the weekends, what on like Tuesdays or Thursdays nights, what are they doing? Like, what are their interests, all these things, because it gives us a North Star for how to communicate to people. In terms of like, let's call it like the cross pollination of your personal brand and company brand, I would just say it can't be forced. Like company brand should not be like retweeting or reposting everything your personal brand does because it'll just come off as inauthentic. It'll come off as Matt is running brand account and his account and just retweeting everything. I would say do it sparingly and do it when like the piece of content that you're creating from the personal account, the brand account's followers would still really care about. It's like the way I think about it on Twitter is a retweet is the equivalent of a recommendation. So it's like, if I retweet something, would I be comfortable recommending that to any of my followers as like a product recommendation or an idea recommendation? If the answer is no, then I shouldn't be retweeting it. And I think that provides like just a good, in my mind, like mental model for once I know from a brand perspective, like my brand account, who is my intended audience. Let's say Morning Brew's intended audience is venture capitalists, like investors. Well, when I do a tweet about like I don't know, my new puppy that I got and what it's like raising that puppy may not make sense for Morning Brew to retweet. But when I do like a tweet thread on why Morning Brew decided not to raise venture capital money and really bootstrap the business and just raise from family and friends, that probably makes sense for Morning Brew brand account to end up retweeting, because the investor audience that we're going after would care about that.
Totally. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Go slide.
Great. I'm going to pass it on to the next question. Sean, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question or questions?
Sure. I guess I have two questions in a row, so we can alternate. Yeah. Hey, Alex, thanks for chatting with us. So the first question is just what triggered the decision for each time you expanded Morning Brew's content offerings, and like, were there any kind of internal controversies around any of those that you had to deal with?
Yeah. So I would say so we started with daily newsletter. The reason we went from daily newsletter to anything else is because we didn't know when we were going to tap out on our daily newsletter's growth. This was at, I want to say 750,000 subscribers. That was the point at which we were like, this is growing well, but we don't know when it's going to slow down. We don't know when it's going to plateau. And like revenue, like the amount of money we make on our daily newsletter directly correlated with like size of audience and number of people opening. And so given that we were uncertain when that was going to slow down, our idea was like, how do we de-risk ourselves in case it does slow down, launch other things that build other audiences that can grow at a faster rate because they're starting smaller. That's when we went from Morning Brew to our B2B newsletters. That's when we launched Emerging Tech Brew and we launched Retail Brew. And the whole thesis was, if Morning Brew goes a mile wide and an inch deep and gives you kind of like all the things you need to know about business to have a smart conversation, how do we then how do we serve the audience by going an inch wide and a mile deep and help make them better in their jobs? That was kind of the idea of like, we're helping people just in general business knowledge. How do we actually work our way into their careers? Because our view is like our lock-in with them could be even higher if we were actually helping them do better in their jobs, which is leading to promotions and making more money. And so the idea was like, let's figure out what verticals we want to launch, and let's use the daily newsletter as the best initial marketing for it. So like, we'll plug the new product in our daily newsletter. It'll create tens of thousands of subscribers to this product on day one, and then we'll figure out other ways to grow it. And so, for example, for like Retail Brew, when we thought about launching verticals, there were basically a few criteria. It was, what is an industry that has enough content or news flow to send out a newsletter at least 3 days a week? The reason we had that was like, it needed to be enough news that there's a reason for people to sign up and like build habit around it. What is an industry or job function where there's a deep enough set of advertisers to like pay us to get in front of the audience? And then also, what of Morning Brew's existing audience in the daily newsletter, what do the proportions look like in terms of industry and function? And like, what is there an industry that a ton of people are in the daily newsletter that we should just start creating content for them day one, since we already own that audience and we have their attention? So that's how we thought about it with B2B. Then going into business casual, our view was like, okay, we have this newsletter thing down pat, but we want to, one, there's always going to be email newsletter risk. Like, what if people's consumption of email newsletter as a medium somehow changes, whether it's via Slack or Discord or anything like that? And the other view is like, not every human being consumes business content through email newsletters. That is like one mode of consuming content. And so our view is like, business casual is our first foray into delivering business content in a way that a different audience may prefer consuming business content. And so that was the idea there. And now where we are is like, we note, can you let me share my screen for a sec? I want to just show you a visual that like kind of guides everything that we think
done.
about and do. We're good? Okay. So the way that like we guide our product decisions now is by basically like this view of like building any media company or audience company. Can you guys see it?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So basically every media company in the world or audience company in the world is this. You have a funnel. Top of the funnel is rented audience, middle of the funnel is owned audience, and bottom of the funnel is monetized audience. And basically all this means is the top of the funnel is social networks, platforms, and search engines. These are the places on the internet where when you create content, you benefit from shareability and discoverability. They are places where there are hundreds of millions, if not billions of people. You have sharing features that allow you to get in front of those people. And the search to discover new content is generally really good. What is the cost of doing business or creating content on these platforms is you don't own the relationship. Facebook does, YouTube does, Google does, Twitter does, etc. Go a step down, you have owned audience. That is where discoverability is harder, shareability is harder, but you truly own your audience. You own the like an email newsletter, you own the email, you own the relationship with your consumer. Podcasts, same thing. Events, same thing. And the bottom of the funnel is monetized audience. That is where you actually have a direct commercial relationship with your consumer. When we think about what Morning Brew has done with our newsletters and with our podcasts, we, I think very differently from a lot of media companies, started with owned audience. We started by building out an owned audience where we truly own the relationship. And so now as we think about our strategy moving forward, it really is actually focusing on this barbell of building out our rented audience and building out our monetized audience. And just to hit on why, like why build out a rented audience? Why build out an audience where you don't truly own the relationship? Well, I don't think building out rented audience is inherently bad. You just shouldn't build your entire media company or audience company on rented audience. This is why so many media companies in like the late 2010s failed, was because they just built audiences on the back of Facebook, Instagram, etc. But what building a rented audience does for us is two things. One, it allows us to meet our audience where they are because people consume content through social. It's like that people are on social a lot every day. If one of our goals was to get to people where they consume content, this is one way to do it. The other reason is like, if we want to get more owned audience and we don't want to have to pay a lot in terms of marketing costs to get more email subscribers, the way we do it is we build a big top of funnel and then we convert those people down into the newsletter, and that lowers how much we have to pay for subscribers. So that's why we do rented audience, or why we're building out rented audience. In terms of monetized audience, it's very simple. We're 100% advertising-based business. I think most businesses in the world would say that being somewhat diversified in their monetization is really important. So the example with advertising is in March of 2020, when COVID hit, our advertising business was crushed for a month. Literally like mass exodus, dollars flying out the window. Like I thought Austin and I were going to have to sell lemonade in order to fund the business. So when you think about like, what are things you can do to avoid that? Well, if we had several streams of revenue that were not correlated with each other in different economic environments, we would have been in a much better position. So one of the things we're focusing on right now at the Brew is monetized audience. And just to give like a little sneak peek, it's a paid product. It's an 8-week accelerator. It's called EMBA, Everyday MBA. And the whole idea is getting business school style knowledge, business school style network without the steaming pile of debt that business school puts you in.
I love that. I think like that is so needed right now. And I've seen like other they're like these other cohort-based courses, like their alternative MBAs, which are so interesting too. And I think like it's so cool that you're disrupting that.
Yep. So we'll see if we can pull it off, but that's what we're working on. It's going to launch in April.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that graphic too. That was great.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna hand it over to Joseph now.
All right. Hi, Alex. Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah.
I was listening to Founders Journal, and there's this episode about you being a manager, and you kind of like highlighted your strengths of being like storytelling and moving fast and innovation and creativity rather than like operations and people management. And I really resonated because I've been like experiencing this problem with my own like newsletter company that I started this summer. So my question is like, as an entrepreneur, have you come to enjoy people management at all? And do you think that being a people manager is necessary to be like a successful entrepreneur?
Yeah. So basically, I think there's two pillars of management. And when people think of managers, I think they very much think of like one very specific skill set, which is more around like structure, prioritization, telling someone what to do, making sure they're staying on timeline, that they're delivering and hitting their goals. that is one part of management. And I think a lot of people forget the second part of management, which is what I would call like investment in the actual employee, like inspiring them to do the work they do, showing that you actually give a shit about them by giving them resources to grow as a professional, helping them to actually think about like mapping out where their career is going, being empathetic in conversations with them, like providing them psychological safety. So when they want to share like a crazy new idea they have for the business, they actually feel the permission and the lack of judgment to do that. And so like these are two like very different skills. One I would say is like left brain, one is right brain. Like one is very much linear thinking, one is very much like empathetic leadership. And my big thing was, as a first time manager, I think I biased very heavily to like this empathetic leadership style of like supporting the people I manage, investing in their career, learning more about them outside of just work. But I think where I had deficiencies was like in creating structure, like putting up the rails in the bowling alley, and they're the bowling ball to keep them on path. Because I think, why did I struggle with that? Because that's not how my brain worked. Like I am like kind of like the person who has 50 ideas going in different directions, like the creative, the person who likes connecting with people. My natural way of thinking is not thinking in straight lines. It's thinking in like fucking like pinball. And so for me to manage someone in a skill set that was not my natural skill set, I think I found a lot of difficulty with. I've gotten better with it over time, but honestly, I think the way this is the cop out, but the way that I've evolved is I've hired people that I think are really good managers, and I don't manage anyone anymore. I more act as like the internal therapist of Morning Brew, where I get to do what I really like to do, which is like learning about these people's stories, understanding what they actually want in their careers, finding out how I can help them, understanding pain points they're feeling within the business. And like now, yeah, like I have zero direct reports, but I speak with probably, I don't know, between 5 and 10 people on our team a week, just like honestly to learn more about them and see how I can elevate them. And at the same time, it's like, it's that. And then it's focusing on how can the people I've hired to be managers, how can I elevate those managers as managers so they can elevate their direct reports? So like one of my big goals I'm working on right now is like management training, which sounds like the most like old school, like MBA thing. But like at the end of the day, if you think about it, no one's really trained in how to be a good manager. Everyone, this is like the classic thing. Young people think they're amazing managers. Like they think they're like born to be great managers. Most people are like the shittiest managers ever. And I think once people put their ego aside, they realize that it's like truly a skill set. It's a matching of art and science. And my goal is bring some of the science to what our managers have to inform the work that they do. And like again, in business school, not to shit on business school, given I was in Ross, but like that was something that I was never taught. It would have been really helpful.
Thank you. That resonates a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Great. Okay, so in the chat, Yash asks, what happened and how did you push through COVID?
So I mean, what happened was generally, so at the highest level, there are a few just like there are a finite number of business models. Advertising is one business model. Advertising is not in the scheme of all businesses in the world. Advertising is not considered like the healthiest business model. Subscription business models are like where everyone wants to build a business. SaaS is like, the sexiest thing, blah, 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 blah. But like advertising is a good business, but it can be a volatile business because you are not charging consumers directly, you're charging businesses, and you're charging businesses out of their marketing budget. When the economy goes to shit and a company is thinking about like, okay, we can't spend as much because we're not making as much because consumers are not buying from us as much. One of the first places that a company will cut their costs is in marketing. And so I didn't experience this at all in the first 4 years of the business. In March, when COVID was just happening, I vividly remember it was March 15th was when we did our first remote day at work, basically as a test to say like, if we end up having to work remote full time, we need to make sure we're able to do it. ended up being where that was not like our test day. We just were remote from that day forward, given how fast things progressed. But 2 days later, it was March 17th. It was like 9 p.m. And I got a message from Austin saying that our E-Trade, who is a big sponsor, pulled their entire sponsorship for the next day. And just for context, like to sponsor an entire Morning Brew newsletter, like today, it would be like $100K. Like if you want to sponsor a full newsletter, like have every sponsorship, it's $100,000. And so basically it was like on the spot, I just heard like one of our advertisers basically, caused us to not have an inflow of, at the time, $85,000 into the bank. And then it was like that spiraled for the next 24 hours into A client, B client, C client, D client, like go down the alphabet. Every single client was like pulling budget, basically saying, we don't know what's happening in the world right now. We don't know how long this quarantine thing is. We don't know even what this virus is, but we are putting all marketing on hold. And so there was a period of 3 weeks, again, like when Austin and I were literally like, are we going to be able to pay our employees? Are we like, how can we avoid laying people off? And I think part of it, like Austin and I were kind of nervous, but also at the same time, I think there's a certain like, I don't want to say insanity, but like naivety in entrepreneurship where it's like, you just like believe you're going to figure shit out. So I think part of it was like Austin and I were just like, this is not good. This sucks, but we're just going to figure it out. There's no option but to figure it out. That's kind of like always been our mentality. But one of the ways we were trying to figure it out was we said in the worst case scenario if advertising doesn't come back, what are all the ways we could find ways to make money off of our audience? We discussed everything from like a donation platform on Patreon to launching an educational course and charging our readers for it, to launching a merchandise store and trying to monetize through that, like all of the things. The benefit we had was our biggest cost as a business was paying for Facebook ads and Instagram ads. Like paid marketing at Morning Brew was our biggest cost. We were spending $500,000 a month on that. And so that's one of those costs that is a variable cost that you can stop on a dime. And so like we went from in the month of March spending $500,000 to in the month of April spending $0. And so having that $500,000 buffer was really helpful for us. But luckily right around May, advertising started to come back and now it's like fully normalized. But for those 3 weeks, it was the most uncertain I felt about the business since kind of writing the first newsletter.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that story.
Yeah, for sure.
Really cool. I'm going to pass it over to Yash, and we have like time for like 2 more questions max, just to be mindful of time. So raise your hand if you want to ask a question, but I'm going to pass it over to Yash right now.
I think you got my questions actually.
Sorry. Oh, I'm a different Yash. Sorry about that. Yeah, sorry for the poor quality. I'm outside. But I was just wondering, like, in terms of like what tools you use at Morning Brew, like, is it all no code? Do you have like custom software? Do you have software engineers, stuff like that?
Yeah. So we do have engineers. So our CMS, like our content management system that we write all of Morning Brew stories in that get published to our site, that's totally custom. We built a piece of software to handle like advertising. So like say Morning Brew signs Bacardi as a new sponsor, that whole flow of, okay, Bacardi said yes, we need to send them a contract. They sign contract. Then we send them a document for them to fill out, like what are the main bullet points about your brand that you want us to use to be able to write advertising copy about. That whole back and forth with clients. We built a piece of software behind that. Actually, one of them, so the names of our pieces of software, so the CMS is Oslo, that Steven just shared, and the our advertising platform is called Comet. And if I'm not mistaken, Comet was named after there's a coffee shop right around Nichols Arcade that is called Comet or Oslo, one of the two. One of these 2 pieces of software is named after a coffee shop in Ann Arbor. I can't remember which one it is. But so that is what we have built from scratch in-house. Our referral program was built in-house. But what I will say is Morning Brew is a media company, not a tech company. So none of these things, while it's like impressive we built this stuff, it is not like the most sophisticated tech in the world. looks probably very different from like if you were looking at the tech stack at like Stripe or Plaid or any of those companies.
Cool. That's super helpful, man. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome. I think our final question of the night, I'm going to pass it over to Sean. I think he has a really interesting education question.
Yeah, so that's the one I was going to go back to. So my first question was just like, if you were a student now, what would you do? But I kind of want to expand the bounds of that question a little bit, which is not just what would you do, but if you had free reign over what the education system looked like and wanted to reshape it, maybe with your audience here today in mind, what would you change, or what would you think about? What would you do as a student?
Yeah. So it's something we've been thinking about a lot since we're building Everyday MBA. So here's kind of like my high level thought is like, I think there are a set of skills that every professional needs, but most people are not taught in a business program, whether it's undergrad or grad. These are the basic skills. So I think you'll see some of these things are taught in business school, and when they are, they're not taught effectively. Like if you think about like what is actually taught in school of these topics, I would say verbal storytelling. That's it. I actually don't know, and maybe how businesses work, analyzing businesses. But what I would say is for the ones that are taught in business school, they're not taught effectively. They're not taught in an engaging way. It's usually like a talking head, like guiding a lecture around a case study that was made in 1892. On the other ones, like hacking productivity, project management and product management, mental models and decision making, these things are like so important. When I think on a daily basis, what are the biggest challenges that hold me back from doing a great job in work? I think it's generally like the smart work bucket, and school does not teach those at all. And to me, those are the highest leverage things that compound over time. It's like those things that you're going to work for the rest of your life. And it doesn't matter what career you're in, what function or what industry. These are the things that no matter what you're going to need. And I just think that these needs are so woefully underserved in any college program. If you think you're going to be a professional, which most people think they're going to be, like these are the things that I would focus on. In terms of like what I would do if I was in school right now, I mean, obviously I'm going to be biased, but I would say start a business. Like to me, college is the best time to start a business. You learn so much. You have unbelievable resources, and the risk is so low. Like the risk is failure, but failure isn't failure. This is a whole thing about like the US startup ecosystem. In the US, like you failed a business, it's considered shameful. In like Israel or other countries, like it is considered like a prideful thing that you failed 3 or 4 times before building like your unicorn. And so my biggest thing is like find something you're passionate about and just like build around it. It doesn't even have to be a business. It can be a nonprofit. Anything that you are taking that forces like growth mindset and you to be entrepreneurially minded in what you're building and you feel ownership over it, I would say like absolutely go for it. Because by the way, when you do that, all of these things that I just listed here, it forces you to learn those things on the job. Everything I just listed here, communications, smart work, empathetic leadership and management, how businesses work, you are forced to learn that in anything where you take an ownership mentality and building something in college.
Retweet. That's so great, Alex. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. It's been amazing.
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. Hopefully this was valuable for you guys. I'm always down to help out if I can. Just shoot me an email. It's alex@morningbrew.com. Even if like, you want like book recommendations or good follows on social, anything, just let me know. Always around.
Awesome. Thank you so much once again. For anyone who wants to learn about V1, feel free to stick around. We have like an onboarding call. But thank you again, Alex, and hope to keep in touch.
Thanks, guys. Go Blue. Take it easy.
Bye.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks for coming, everyone. If you want to learn more about V1, we have an onboarding session led by Meda and Ellie, so feel free to stick out for that. It's only gonna be 10 minutes, so you can learn more about the community. All right, Mayda and Ellie, do you guys want to take it away and like share your screen and such?
Yeah, hi everybody. So I'm Ellie. I'm part of V1's team.
Hi, I'm Mayda. I'm also part of V1's team.
Welcome to V1. So I can share my screen and I have some slides up. One second, let me get them up again. They should be. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
It's
I see a
loading for me.
black screen.
Wait, let me stop recording real